So welcome to episode 7 of the Hard Truth About B2B E-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, CEO of Trellis.
And hi, I'm Timothy Peterson. I am a client advocate for Trellis. And it's great to have you here today. And I'd like to just tell you a little bit about our sponsor before we dive into our topic and talk to our guests today. So our sponsor is Punch-Out-To-Go. And they're a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. Punch-Out-To-Go's iPaaS technology seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. And with their solution, you can immediately reduce integration complexities for Punch-Out catalogs, electronic purchase orders, e-invoices, and the like. So thank you to our sponsor, and I'm going to throw it back to Isaiah to give a quick intro to our special guests today.
Yeah, thank you. So we're excited to bring in Laux from Outgrow.io. So Laux, you've been on kind of the agency space, working with lots of different companies across the board. And I think you reached out to me. I think it was LinkedIn, because I think you saw some of my B2B posts and you were interested in kind of some of the stuff that we were doing. So we're excited to bring you on. I think you're our first international guest. Some of the people we might have a little bit of experience in international, but I think you're the first one that's like, strictly focused on outside of the US market mainly. So excited to talk about that and what you're seeing in B2B, and hopefully it can help people think more globally about B2B. So yeah, Laux, maybe you can give us a little bit more in-depth explanation of yourself and your experience.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. It's an honor to be here. So what we do at Outgrow is that we help retailers who are particularly interested in improving their technology, using up-to-date technology for basically all of their e-commerce experience. We help them reach that goal and basically transition from old legacy tech to brand new, more interesting and more innovative platforms. So we're specialized on one platform that we're especially specialized on is Reaction Commerce, which you've probably heard about. So I may have some biases during the podcast today, but we're mainly working with Reaction, and we provide development services for our clients, and we also provide training for their own developers if they happen to have any, or if they want to have their own team in-house. And we also provide standard, architecture, technology consulting services. And we are based, as you said, we're international. We're not based in the US. We're based in Dubai with clients typically in Europe or Southeast Asia.
Gotcha. Awesome. So what I kind of want to, since you're on the technology side so heavily, what I want to kind of help our listeners understand and maybe think more broadly about is just in terms of technologies. You guys see, I have a feeling you see some different technologies than maybe we might see in the US, but I'm sure there's still a lot of overlap. In B2C, we see a lot of Shopify, Salesforce, Demandware, or it's now Salesforce's Demandware, and then BigCommerce and Magento. But with B2B, it seems like there's a larger, like we see a lot more different technologies in B2B. Definitely a lot of Magento. But there's a platform called Insight. There's another platform called Unilog in the US, some of these smaller platforms. You mentioned Reaction Commerce. Like, how did you guys get into that? Or did you evaluate the other platforms? Or what made you kind of feel like they were a good fit? And how specifically does that relate to B2B e-commerce?
So first of all, I should outline the fact that we're not only working with B2B clients. We're working on the whole spectrum, whether that is B2B or B2C, or sometimes B2C, which is very interesting as well. But Reaction Commerce basically does it all. It's not a traditional commerce platform like your Magento or or the ERP based ones like Oracle Commerce, etc. It's really more of a developer framework more than anything else. So basically, Reaction Commerce is a good choice when you're considering building a fully custom solution because you have very specific needs, and you're just looking for a framework to start off with, not reinventing the wheel, and just having this solid platform to start on, which does not get in your way with a plugin system, et cetera, to kind of, it's not preventing you from thinking outside of the box, which is a big problem that developers on Magento have, for example. So this is the question that it answers.
Yeah, so you're not coming with all the overhead of a Shopify or Magento, so it's more of a developer platform, developer tool, almost like a framework. Like, would you say it's almost more similar to something like a Laravel or React or like some of these developer frameworks, but
yeah,
e-commerce?
sort of. Well, so Reaction Commerce, first of all, is a GraphQL API. So that's what you get first and foremost. Okay,
Gotcha.
So it's a Commerce GraphQL API. It's a great fit if, for example, you have an existing application and you want to integrate e-commerce features on top of it. Whether that is B2B or B2C, it's a great fit for that. But you can, of course, create e-commerce experiences from scratch with Reaction. You get an admin panel, you get an example storefront. You can build your own storefront on any technology you want, whether that is React or Angular. So it's ultimate flexibility. So it fits a very specific type of clients. But yeah, it's really more something you would consider if you're going to build from scratch and you're just comparing, well, do I build from scratch or do I start with a framework? So yeah, it's more of a developer framework for sure.
And is it a hosted platform, or like or do you have to host it, or how do you guys set it up?
No, so you do have to host it yourself. Well, this is part of the agency's role, right? But well, sometimes. But this is something that you would have to administer yourself on, something like AWS, or it's using Docker pretty heavily. So simplifies the whole DevOps process quite a bit, and you can basically deploy it on any cluster management technology like Kubernetes or AWS ECS or anything like this.
Sure. And so, since this is more of a developer, focused platform, do you ever get pushback, or like when you're talking to, clients, I'm just kind of curious what you guys are seeing. Like, are people like concerned about going with something like this, or do you have to kind of like talk them into it, and explain the benefits, or how do you guys approach that?
So I won't lie to you, it's a very niche market for sure. And what we're seeing is basically people coming at us for Reaction Commerce specifically. We're not really in the outreach game where we're gonna try and convince companies to switch over to Reaction. If some companies come to us and are comparing Reaction Commerce to other platforms, of course, we're going to help them to kind of understand what is the better choice. But we're not going to try and convince companies that are not ready to invest in a platform like this, because it's so different than the platforms you typically find, and it's not a great fit for everybody. It's like for some companies, Magento is a perfect choice. And Reaction Commerce would not make sense for them, maybe. So
yeah, really, you could say that about any platform. And just out of curiosity, what specifically on the B2B, or maybe they're hybrid B2C, B2B, why are they choosing Reaction Commerce? Like, have they worked with something else, like a Shopify or Magento, and then decided, hey, like this isn't working, we need to like look at other options?
Well, I would say lots of them have definitely outgrown their current e-commerce platform, which is part of the reason why we've chosen the name Outgrow for the company. But I would say, most of them just don't want to deal with Frankenstein type of architecture with lots of plugins, basically working with each other and sometimes kind of overlapping. In terms of functionality that you can find on Magento. For example, you have a lot of Magento sites out there, which are just a bunch of plugins crammed together in one project. And, at some point, the more you scale this, the less it works, and, you end up just fighting against bugs, of plugins that are, don't really work well together. And it ends up just slowing down your process of releasing new features, etc. Where you could have basically an almost tailor-made platform that would really suit your needs, and it would last get in your way a lot less than something that would be plugin based like Magento. So it's a very specific type of customers, but most of them definitely outgrowing standard platforms for sure.
Gotcha. Cool. So, and how did you get into this? Like, how did you, I mean, just kind of curious how, I'm assuming you've seen some of these other, or maybe you worked in some of these other platforms in the past, and you kind of got into Reaction and saw it as like an opportunity to do something different.
Yeah, so it started with just myself as a freelance developer. I used to work on basically any project, not just e-commerce. And sometime, someday, some clients came to me and inquired about building an e-commerce website, and that was the first time that I was working on an e-commerce website. So I kind of looked at my options, etc., and found Reaction Commerce, which was back in the days in a very early beta stage. So I didn't get the chance to use it, and I kind of got some more interest for e-commerce because of the specifics of the market and helping merchants, which I found very satisfying. Seeing their orders improve, etc., etc. But I would say that when Reaction Commerce came out of the beta stage and ended up getting more stable, the more I was working in e-commerce, the more I was frustrated with the platforms out there that didn't fit my ideals of a platform as a developer, and didn't really fit the needs of my clients so much, depending on the project. So I ended up looking at Reaction more seriously, and it ended up working for some clients that I had at the time, and that was my first project with it. And then I ended up specializing in it. The more my freelance business grew, the more I had to delegate and work with a team. So that ended up building Outgrow as it is today.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a cool story.
I have a question for you connected to something I think that you do that a lot of other folks we have interviewed so far don't really do, and at least they don't feature it. I've noticed when I was looking around on your site that you have a big training component to your program. So you consult and you train, and I've seen the value of it from multiple angles. I was an in-house trainer for one project that I worked on, a replatforming project that was a pretty big thing a few years ago, and I really loved that, and the business benefited greatly from having it in place. But tell me a little bit more about the training aspect of what you do.
So that's more of a recent addition, I would say, to our business model. The core business model is definitely on development, but training and support is something that I see growing tremendously in the future, because you see a lot more interest lately, from retailers for having their own teams of developers in house with their own project managers, etc. Because they want to be in control. A lot of them, especially the ones that we're dealing with, who are very specific types of clients who have outgrown, one or multiple e-commerce platforms, are getting to a scale that is, necessitating to have control over their project and what features they ship and how much time they ship, et cetera, et cetera. So this is definitely something that I see growing a lot, and especially now with the COVID-19 situation, you see a lot of demand for online remote training over Zoom, for example, as a webinar. So yeah, this is definitely something that's interesting, and that, in my opinion, will grow tremendously in the next 5 to 10 years. You'll see a lot more big retailers, in my opinion, build in-house teams, and of course they want to get their developers trained to all work the same way and have the same base knowledge of the platform that they're working on.
So would you say there's an opportunity for agencies like yourself and Trellis and anyone out there to kind of basically help these companies, build up their internal teams?
Well, in my opinion, yeah. The agency model works great for the majority of retailers, but you always have this tiny fraction of them that will want to have their own in-house team, and might as well help them to do it the right way, right? So there's definitely business to be done here. There's definitely help that's needed from these retailers to build these teams internally. So why not help them? And, a lot of agency owners will say, well, this is taking business from us, etc. But I mean, these people have already made up their minds and they're already moving to an in-house team. So
Yeah.
whatever you say, it's going to happen, so might as well help them doing it the right way, implement the right best practices, have their developers really trained on the platform of choice. And, you'll end up with something that will really benefit them. And you'll actually end up with long-term recurring customers, because guess what? When they'll upgrade to a larger team or something like this, they'll come back to you for some more training. When, the platform that you've trained them on has a new major version, they'll come back as well. So it's definitely business that agencies can get into, the more technical agencies at least. And it's not that much overhead when you already have a team of developers working on projects. They have the knowledge. If you have developers who have this interest for training others, then it's a pretty easy, second line of business to add to your existing business model, for sure.
Yeah.
What I find interesting too is that, I spent a lot of my career as a marketer in addition to doing a lot of e-commerce work. And, this kind of happened in marketing first, because there were so many different things that kept popping up in digital marketing. It's like, okay, now we have to learn affiliate, and now we have to learn marketplaces, and now we have to learn, social ads and all of these things. So really, businesses that were equipped, agencies that were equipped to train, really have done quite well with that. So I'm a big fan of this happening, in this part of the business world too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me change gears just for a second, if it's okay. I wanted to see if I can ask a little bit about success and failure, because it's a favorite topic of mine, and I think it's something our listeners, our viewers, are going to be very interested in as well. What do you see as defining factors of really a successful B2B, e-commerce operation in particular today versus one that's struggling or maybe not quite there yet?
So one of the common factors that I see for B2B projects that are failing is typically, most of them have almost no scope for no specific scope for the project. You see a lot of projects, coming to agencies with like very broad requirements, etc. And that is what happens when you have no technical people on the other end who will put together some very generic requirements, but nothing really specific, and you end up having a vague idea of what the project should look like. At first, for people who are just getting into the agency business, the requirements may seem very fine. But when you get into the specifics of the project and you're midway into it, you realize, oh, well, this we didn't talk about, this specific feature we didn't talk about, this we don't really know how it's supposed to work, etc. You end up figuring out things, kind of in the middle of the action, which is something that typically ends up causing delays. So this is definitely something I would say, is a big factor for not success, a big factor for failure of B2B projects. And you see that together with no real ownership from the retailers on the projects, basically saying, you'd see the retailers basically saying, all right, well, you're the agency, you take care of everything. And when you have your punctual demos, for example, if you have a demo every 2 weeks, nobody would really say anything. And I'm sure you've been in this situation where, oh, well, yeah, it looks fine, it looks amazing, great work. And you don't really get any feedback. Most of the people you're going to talk to on the retailer side, and once again, I'm talking about these projects that are failing. Typically, the people you're going to talk to are not really technical people. So most of them will not really understand the technical layer of what you're building. And the technical layer may very well be extremely important depending on the nature of their business and the complexity of the project that they're building. So there really needs to be ownership from the retailers in order for an agency-led project to work. The agency is not doing all the work.
This is a common topic we've been kind of discussing, I think, for most of these episodes. It keeps coming up where they need to have that internal person. So for these, retailers, B2B merchants, distributors, manufacturers, whatever kind of company it is trying to do a new B2B site, what kind of person would you recommend that they have? Like, I personally don't think they necessarily need to have a developer in-house, but maybe someone that's at least technical enough to understand, how to communicate with an agency. We call it the e-commerce manager, but maybe kind of like I think they have to have kind of like a skill set that's somewhat marketing, somewhat business requirements, understanding the business processes and understands a little bit of the development enough to communicate well in detail with a company. But what kind of skill sets and people are you seeing that are internally working well with you guys, and where the failure is not happening?
Well, pretty much exactly what you're saying. An e-commerce manager is definitely, chief of e-commerce, would be definitely something that works very well, that we've seen working very well on the projects that we're involved with. The general skill set of understanding broadly, the technologies behind the website and being good at marketing as well. So being able to take care of all the marketing and merchandising aspects basically is something that every company should have internally. This is not something that you want to delegate to an agency, in my opinion, especially.
I agree.
It depends on the scale of the business. But if you're at a larger scale, this is definitely something that you want to have in-house. And I would go even further saying that, the ideal project scenario for me would be an agile project where the product owner would be on the retailer side. So if you have this marketing / slightly technical person who happens to have skills in agile project management and who can play the role of a product owner to a certain extent, that would be the perfect scenario for me, because there would be total ownership from the retailer without getting too technical either. But at least, the retailer knows exactly what is going on at each stage of the project. And I think that's really valuable.
Awesome.
I agree. I mean, one of the things that I've advocated for in a lot of different situations is really a digital organization. And again, it's people change these terms all the time, but basically it means that there are hard skills and there are soft skills there. Because if it's a marketing organization, there may be some folks who are more strategic and don't really have a lot of the skill sets that are necessary. If it's an e-commerce organization, sometimes, at least it used to be the case, that some people were just technical, right? And so that was also an issue. They were only technical. And so now it's kind of like, well, what terms do you really use? So I've often just kind of put it in this box and say, well, it's the digital organization. There need to be these owners, these stakeholders that really can play both sides of that coin.
Yeah, and I think this is such an important topic. So, because we see the exact same thing with you, where you think that what they need, but then you get into it and it turns out that person didn't really understand or didn't give you the right requirements, and then you're like, oh crap, we're halfway in this project, and the person that we thought was telling us what was accurate didn't actually know what they were doing. So, going kind of digging into those failures more, and the successes, like, because I also think sometimes companies will hire someone like that, but they hire the wrong person. So do you see that? Like, how, and because I think that's a really challenging situation, because they have the person and you think they're good, because, in sales, sometimes it's like everyone's happy and they're kind of like, oh, this is going to be a great project. And then it's 3 months into it, you're like, oh man, this person wasn't as good as we thought they were going to be on driving the project. So can you speak to that a little bit? I'm just curious to see.
Also, I've never been on the retailer side of things. I've always had my own agency or worked as a freelancer. But what I can tell you is that, when you're hiring, if you're listening to this podcast and you're a retailer and you're looking to hire a person like this, look for past experience. Look for, if you're hiring, typically for this position, you'd be hiring a pretty senior person. So, look for both technical experience. Again, we're not talking about having somebody who's been a developer. That's not really, what we're looking for here, but look for past experience that would be slightly technical, maybe some project management skills, projects where that person was a lead, and actually, involved in the technical aspects of the project to a certain extent. And look for, as we said, important to have marketing skills as well to understand the consumer aspects of, what you're building as a company. So it's important to have marketing skills. It's important to have worked in with merchandising and the catalog aspects, etc. Because you'll want this person to kind of have wear two hats at the same time. Be able to weigh in on the technical projects that you'll have going on, and also weigh in on the marketing decisions, and what is going to be in terms of what you're going to put up in terms of content of the website, etc., etc. So ideally, that person should wear the two hats and obviously have experience in the two sides, previously.
Yeah. So kind of going into the next topic, and I think this is part of the failure is, agencies struggle to work with merchants that don't have good scope and don't have that good internal champion to work with you. So that's pretty clear. But where else do you see? Because I think that there's a lot of agencies failing with B2B specifically. I want to dig into B2B because I think B2C is a lot simpler. You can kind of get away sometimes with Shopify or something like that. With B2B, you have like potentially corporate accounts, corporate experiences that might be different from B2C. Where do you see, like, and it might be hard for you to answer this because you don't know what the other agencies are doing, but I'm assuming you get a little bit of a taste when you talk to a company, they failed with someone else, so you understand like, oh, why this failed. Where do you see these B2B agencies fail, or agencies failing with B2B? Do you think that sometimes they don't even understand B2B? Like they get e-commerce, but they don't understand B2B, and then they try and do it and it fails, and that's why they're coming to you potentially.
I think I'm seeing two scenarios here. I'm seeing agencies that typically don't work on B2B projects and kind of try to improvise things. And I'm also seeing agencies that only work on B2B and have never worked on B2C projects. And that, in my opinion, is not necessarily a good thing, depending on the experience of the people who work in the agency. Of course, if the people individually have experience in B2C, then that helps tremendously. But in my opinion, you can't be just focused on B2C because on B2B, because you end up kind of in this echo chamber of practices that are very specific to the B2B world, which is, it's important to be aware of them, but then you kind of end up losing track of what is happening around outside of this B2B bubble, where you can take inspiration from what's happening, for example, in the B2C world. So I'm seeing a lot of that where, you kind of just have this agency that keeps on applying the same methods that have been used for the past 10 years since basically the invention of, B2B e-commerce. And they don't really innovate just because they've always been doing the same thing, always dealt with B2B clients. So, we've always done it this way. So why would we change? That's typically what I'm seeing, especially in the B2B world.
To summarize, just so people understand, and I think because I think we pride ourselves at Trellis, and I totally agree with you, is that one of the reasons we're good at B2B is because we have a lot of B2C experience, and vice versa. But I think it's important to also understand B2B and their uniqueness of B2B. Like, you can't just do B2C work and think that it's just going to work magically for B2B. There's a big difference, but being able to do both is important. And you think that agencies need to have both experience to be successful. That makes sense.
That's for sure. You can't just ignore the specifics of B2B. I mean, whether you like it or not, your clients are obviously going to be at a certain scale. They're going to be dealing with ERPs and things like things that you would typically not find in a B2C project, except if it's at a certain scale. I mean, if you're working if you're working for Macy's, of course, it's a B2C project, but you're going to have to deal with ERPs. But, if you can just forget about all this and kind of ignore it, the B2B clients will have specific needs and they will have specific technologies. You just have to have, in my opinion, experience from both worlds to kind of take the best from each side and kind of combine it to bring in new ideas, but also, not be ignorant about the way that your clients work, because there are some things that you will never be able to change about their workflow and the way things work.
Absolutely.
So I just want to zero in on one little piece of that, because having worked on both B2B and B2C myself, on agency side and on the brand side, I've been ahead of e-commerce for both B2B and B2C. What I've seen is that it's talking about clients as consumers, and really they saying, well, if I can do this in my B2C transaction, does it make sense to apply some of that here for B2B? How to make it frictionless, how to make it more seamless, how to do delivery a little bit differently or get notifications a little differently. So is there a specific one or two things that you think you've taken from B2C and you've seen applied very, very well in B2B lately? I mean, very specific things.
Yeah, for sure. The first thing that comes to mind here is transparency. That's where I see a lot of B2B retailers failing, just because it's always been done that way. So, for example, you have a lot of B2B websites where the manufacturer is selling directly to clients, but they're not. So you have a catalog, you can browse the catalog, etc. You have product pages, but you don't have prices. And you have to create an account to get the prices. Well, why is that? I'll tell you what. The first thing I hear when I suggest, all right, put some public prices so that it reduces the friction and you get a better conversion rate. Some smaller entrepreneurs and SMEs, they're just getting into the game and they're not used to that. And guess what? They're probably going to go with your competitor, which is showing prices publicly. It's not that big of a deal, but it gets you some more consumers who are maybe not used to this. You'll always have your previous recurring customers who've been with you for a long time, for sure. But why would you not make your price list public? In my opinion, it's not that big of a deal for most. Obviously, there are exceptions, but for most industries. And what I'm hearing when I'm suggesting to make the price list public, kind of essentially making it work as a normal B2C e-commerce website, is, oh well, prices are different for each consumer. It depends on the volume that they order, etc. For sure, it does. That's one of the specifics of B2B. But what you can do is you can have a standard unit price, or you can even specify on your PDP that you need to order 100 units to qualify for an order. That's no problem. You can still show a unit price. You can have customer accounts that are linked to your ERP, and that pull in on the e-commerce platform itself, pull in the discounts, the corporate discounts that some of your clients are getting individually. You can do that. It's just a little bit of development work, but you can do it. And that does not prevent you from, it's not because you have prices that are individual to each client that you cannot show a standard base price. And the second thing that I'm hearing all the time is, oh, well, we don't want our, well, not all the time, but sometimes, is we don't want our competitors to see our prices. Well, guess what? Your competitors already have your prices because they've signed up as a ghost customer that doesn't exist, and they've already gotten your price.
I used to do that all the time, all the time.
I totally agree. The reasons the reasons they're not doing it don't outweigh the benefits of doing it, and that's the problem. Is that these companies have been doing this stuff for 100 years or 50 years, and the market has changed. Trellis, we buy tons of, I mean, not as much now because of coronavirus, we're not in the office all the time, but we buy all our furniture online. We buy like all of our supplies online. We sign up for B2B. We have an Apple B2B account. We have a Lenovo B2B account, but we want like speed. Like we want to log in quickly and buy and see prices. And like, if we have to like call in or like deal with a slow process to get prices, we're probably not going to do that, because it's not worth the effort for the volume that we're buying.
And you know what? I think you touched an interesting point here, because you talked about office supply. And one thing that I see growing a lot in the future is, in my opinion, subscriptions for B2B businesses, especially in office supplies. this already exists, but it's, it's not very widespread. But the day that it starts, convincing larger corporations and really the whole B2B market to go ahead and use subscriptions just like, B2C customers would, then it's going to be a huge change for B2B commerce. And this is definitely coming, whether you like it or not, it's coming because of the convenience, because of sometimes the discounts that you could get, if you subscribe for a year to a product, some things like meeting room supplies, etc. This is definitely something that's going to be
absolutely, or like coffee, or whatever it is, food. Like if you have like food that comes in, like snacks. So actually, what we from some of our previous B2B merchant guests, I think it's kind of going to be a sort of like subscription, but maybe a little bit different, where it's like, I want to purchase 1,000. I want to get the volume discount of 1,000, but I want some control on delivery. So maybe I get 100 in March and 200 in June when I need more. So you get like a little bit of control of when you get those deliveries, so that you're not sitting on 1,000 units of something you don't need all at once. So I think that's kind of where the market is moving, but it's not quite there culturally or technology wise, where companies can just easily do that.
Well, there's even a B2C component to that right now that I'm aware of. I was working with a business recently for a health and wellness product, and in order for consumers to get the volume discount, it basically worked exactly the way you're describing it, Isaiah. They had to agree to a certain number, like I'm buying 48 of these that will be shipped for a month. If they cancel at any time, then they are required to pay the full price for the products they already got.
Yeah,
that's basically how.
And it's funny because the stuff's in B2C, and it's like, why can't we just apply that to B2B? And these B2B companies are like, no, we can't do that. It's not how we, they're still so stuck in their ways sometimes. But I think things are changing fast right now. I think with coronavirus has obviously opened up people's eyes and made people realize how important e-commerce is, no matter what you do. So I'm curious, because I really like getting into the specifics here. We talked about some of the B2C specific features that are applying to B2B. Are there any B2B specific features that you have seen as very successful that are maybe more B2B specific, like corporate accounts is a good example. I mean, obviously if you're B2C, you don't need corporate accounts for a company. Are there any that you've seen be most successful so far?
Yeah, I think digital products is something that a lot of B2B companies should be looking at, especially the ones who have a consulting business where they produce, I would say, intellectual work for their clients. There's a lot of them that can apply, kind of turn this around and look at selling pre-made digital products online. So, for example, I've worked on a very interesting project for a map reseller and editor. So, as in geographical maps. The project is at shop.geospatial.com if you want to check it out. And this is a business that's been very successful in selling maps and also doing what they call land surveys. Basically, like if you want to have an altitude map of a specific area, you can't find it. They can have it done for you. They'll send somebody to the site and they'll have your custom map ready. Basically, that's what they do. So they have this as a branch of their website. They also sell maps as paper sheets or digital maps. But what I'm saying here is they're also selling digital maps online. You can buy them and download them right away. And this is not something that you're typically seeing in this industry, which I think is very innovative. And it's definitely something that a lot of companies can apply to their own industry. I'm talking about this for maps, which is a product that you can easily put online. But when you think about it, a lot of these intellectual industries where they produce intellectual work for clients, they can basically resell a lot of digital products the way that this map reseller does. So I think this is definitely something that's going to be I'm sorry. Thunderstorm is
Oh, no worries.
it's possible, just so that you're aware, it's possible that my internet connection drops if we have a power outage here, which sometimes happens. So just so that you're aware.
Let's hope not. Well, we've made it through most of the episode, so that's really interesting. So yeah, I mean, and that could. Do you see? I'm just curious if there's any opportunity. Like, let's say you're a distributor or manufacturer and you sell, office supplies is the example. It doesn't matter, but some sort of physical good. Do you think that could be complemented with some sort of like digital products or digital services that are kind of like a complement to these products in any ways? Is that, or is it more so service intellectually,
Well,
B2B service companies?
I don't really see a digital product, a pivot for companies selling office supplies, for example. That's not really something. Well, if you think about it hard enough, I'm sure that you can find something. But right off the top of my head, that's not really something I can.
The only
as you say, it's services.
The only exception is just there are exceptions to that. I mean, there are office supply companies that provide videos about how to set up your office fully that are based on like how you do a crate and barrel, video showing like, this is how to do your dining room. This is how to do your kitchen. There are videos now from office supply companies on this is how to set up your office. This is how to set up your, conference room. And they show you all the office products that you need to get in it. Right. So that I think is something that is a tool, but they also have classes that are trained. They offer classes like training classes and how to, create an office environment for 40 to 100 people. I mean, things like that I've seen available.
That's actually an amazing idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, really, and it's easy, right? I mean, you could imagine doing that in less than an afternoon with low production value, and then being able to sell that, quite, for an extended period of time. So I like ideas like that have popped up recently.
Yeah, so this more digital video, digital products in B2B, but you're talking about also services. So, but I think a lot of manufacturers and distributors do services. They do some sort of custom services or consulting, or they might sell these supplies, but their real value isn't just that they sell the supplies, it's that they'll come and service the supplies or they'll come and provide guidance. So there might be some opportunity for them to sell that as a digital product in some way.
Sure.
Well, I think, I'm sorry. I have my dog barking here because the thunder, he gets scared easily. Anyways, I think there's a huge opportunity for services as well. For example, when you have resellers of office supplies. Once again, I'm jumping back on your example. Well, you can have services for I don't know, like setting up for example, you're buying a whiteboard. What about, hey, we come up to your place and we set it up for you. You don't have to hire a separate contractor to do it. No worries. We'll take care of it. That's something with a special pricing. You do kind of a bundle
like a digital
pricing. This is something you see a lot on B2C, kind of as an upsell maybe. I don't see a lot of B2B companies doing upsells, and this is definitely something that could work for B2B easily. So there are definitely things that you can take inspiration from in the B2C world, and that includes upsell of services. Why not?
Yeah. So and one of the last things I want to get into is in terms of B2B e-commerce. I want to kind of make this two parts. You mentioned ERP and making the pricing specific on an account basis. Do you see that being one of the challenges? I mean, that's definitely been one of the challenges that we see, is that these companies have legacy ERP systems. They're not designed for e-commerce, and then they have to kind of like figure out how to marry that into e-commerce, and that's not always an easy thing. And then they might not have good people on their end to communicate that with you, and that can be challenging. So do you guys see that as a challenge with the ERP systems?
Yeah, well, I'd say it really depends on the approach to ERP that the company has. Typically, what will be happening is that you'll have these retailers who have an ERP contractor, and their role is just to take care of the ERP. And that's all. They'll be reselling the ERP because they have a license with Microsoft for Dynamics or whatever. They'll be providing services to add things on top of the ERP. But typically these contractors don't really tend to think outside of the box, just because they're doing only ERPs, and that's what they do.
Yeah.
So no offense there for ERP contractors. If you're listening to this podcast, that's I have nothing against you, but typically that's what you end up seeing. And you can do a lot of things with ERPs. It's not necessarily a bad thing that your client is using ERPs as a main framework for their business. You can actually extend most of them, Dynamics and Oracle, a lot of them out there have very powerful features, for example, to make some data available as a REST API. You can use that to, basically pull data from your ERP onto your website. You don't have to rely on batch data imports, etc. You can just have them communicate natively.
Yeah.
A lot of retailers don't do that because they don't see the value, which in my opinion seems crazy, but I guess they've just been explained wrong, and they don't really see, oh well, this is a big investment, we're not going to do that. But it turns your whole online business upside down to do it the right way and have the right integration in place. So it's just, in my opinion, it's just the wrong paradigm which is being applied at a lot of these retailers. But you can actually do a lot of very, very good things with ERPs and build amazing experiences, provided that you use the right e-commerce platform.
Yeah, so I totally agree that it's very possible and it can be done, but why is it the wrong paradigm? Is it because they're still stuck in their kind of like batch process mindset, or they don't see it as necessary to have the real-time data go to e-commerce, or why do you see it not?
So I think two things here. The first is the investment, because obviously, building a bridge between your ERP and your website can be costly, especially if you have a lot of custom data in your ERP, which is typically the case. That can be pretty costly. If you don't build this bridge the right way, there's a big chance that every time you add a new custom field, you'll have to modify the bridge as well to make it compatible, etc. So it's an extra overhead for sure. But the second most common case is that, as you said, a lot of companies are stuck in their batch import processes, and after all, it's always been the way it worked. So why change it if it works? Maybe our customers are not getting real-time prices or real-time availability for products, but it's updated every 24 hours, and it's more than enough. A lot of companies are thinking that way, and I can certainly understand to an extent. But the day that your main competitor, starts, improving on that aspect of their business, then there's probably going to be a preference for your competitor, which is probably going to have a more usable online experience and probably going to be more enticing to new customers. So that's, in my opinion, something that gets overlooked very easily, but it's definitely really important. And B2B retailers that are doing that and actually paying attention are pretty rare, in my opinion, but these are the ones that are getting noticed out there for building amazing experiences.
So the ones that are really building that real-time experience, that more quick, fast, getting the data from the ERP, the main data that they need to the consumer or the B2B customers' hands quickly are excelling. So what do you see as the biggest challenge for B2B e-commerce in the next 5-10 years? I think the past 10 years have been kind of just exploring and getting up and running, and now I think it's more about building that better experience that we've been talking about. But what do you see as kind of stopping, or what do you think the challenge is going to be for these companies?
Well, over the past few years, we've seen a lot of, I would say over the past 10 years, we've seen, a lot more sole traders, a lot more small entrepreneurs getting started. Entrepreneurship has become a lot more common than it was before. A lot of these companies are basically, they have their own mindset, which is that they're dealing with corporate clients that have a certain size, and maybe they're going to deal with SMEs, but they're going to impose the workflow of corporate clients to these SMEs, which don't necessarily need all that extra overhead when making orders. And I think that it's important for B2B retailers to take that into account. There are more SMEs now than there have ever been, and especially we've been talking about the Middle East and Asia, especially in Asia and the Middle East. Outside of the US, there's an entrepreneurship. Even in the US, there's an entrepreneurship boom, but it's at an even larger scale outside of the country. So that's even more important for international retailers. So take that into account and basically expect to, well, blur the line between B2B and B2C. I would say that as kind of a summary of, what we've been talking about, bringing B2C features and paradigms to B2B. This is important in my opinion because the line is getting blurred. The more the more time goes, the more the line is blurred, in my opinion. You have, a lot of sole traders and new entrepreneurs are expecting, a B2C-like experience to a certain extent. So take that into account and make your experience more simple and more user-friendly.
I would definitely echo that in my experience. Both U.S. and international comments that you made about the growth of entrepreneurship, outside the U.S. is really extraordinary, but also that second part really hits home for me. And I think for our listeners, there's something, about coming into the market now and saying, I'm going to do X, as a B2B e-commerce business. They're going to have assumptions that are very different from any legacy business. They're going to want things to happen in a very particular way, and they're going to want data to be used real time and all of those things. So it's really just figuring out how to deal with it and making sure that all those entrepreneurs get what they want and get what they need.
And you especially see that in with the younger generations, and a lot of them have, me included, are what we could call digital natives. I'm not really a fan of this term because typically it's used to stereotype, generations, etc. But it's kind of true. I was born with the internet. I've never known the world before the internet. It's very different. I have a very different way of interacting with websites and suppliers online than somebody who may be 50 years old and used to order over the phone or fax with a paper catalog. It's such a different paradigm that these younger generations and I even kind of feel outdated now when I see, my younger brother, who's 12 years old, doing basically anything on a smartphone, where I still use my computer for most of my work. But things are moving quick, and especially when you'll have this young generation who's currently, 14, 15, when they will turn 20, something like this, they will become your B2B customers. So think about how you want them to feel, about your brand and how you want them to interact with the products that you have to sell online. The whole experience will change dramatically when these younger generations are going to become your customers.
I agree.
I completely agree.
It's crazy to think about. Yeah, every year it's going to be more and more that millennial. We call it the millennials, and in the US is going to become more and more the customer. And now millennials, what people don't realize is I think the youngest millennials are in the US are now like 24 or something. So they're already like in business at the youngest age. And now you have this like next generation below them that are going to start becoming, potentially corporate customers. So yeah, it's definitely happening. And B2B, they have to adapt. I mean, I kind of what scares me and what prompted me to do this is that I'm nervous that a lot of these 100-year-old businesses aren't going to be around because they're not going to adapt fast enough. And
I won't name the business in order to embarrass them, but I did one of these 100-year-old businesses not too long ago as working on a potential project. And, we were trying to talk about, possible innovations, and we were saying, well, think about how people shop for fashion or, how things occur in social media. And they're not like that at all. They're not doing these things, but it's really like tapping and swiping. And are you going to do voice activated ordering, right? Are you going to really do that? And the answer is they really should, right? I mean, the answer is you've got to think about that. Why can't I, talk into my Alexa for anything and order it today and make sure that it works for B2B too, right? And these are things that are just, on the very early edges, on the fringes, and a lot of people are much younger than me, are going to be pushing this forward, making sure that this happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes I listen to Gary V, which you probably know about.
We all know Gary. I know Gary personally.
And oh, you do? Nice. Well, I was listening to an old podcast or a YouTube video, I don't remember, but he was talking exactly about this, about the challenges of B2B companies going forward in the next 10-ish years. And he was giving an example of his marketing agency was able to sell jet engines on Facebook ads. Think about it. Think when you go to a client and they tell you, oh, no, we're not going to do we're not going to build a responsive website because none of our customers use smartphones to order. Think about that. They've been able to sell jet engines from, I think it was Rolls-Royce or whatever, and they've been able to sell jet engines on Facebook ads. Like just targeting executives on Instagram or whatever from specific industries, and they've been able to do that. So when you think about it, jet engines, it's it's pretty attractive, but I would say it's the least attractive, B2B product in terms of selling.
It's probably also really expensive too. So yeah.
So I think this is definitely, there's a shift in mentality, and the retailers that get on board will be the one who survive. But a lot of them will definitely disappear.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one of the things, and this is Gary Vee, this isn't me saying this, one of the things he says is you just have to go where everyone else isn't, right? You have to go there first. So go to Facebook. If Rolls-Royce selling jet engines, it had to be a first on Facebook, and you're going to get extraordinary attention. And here we are talking about it as an example, right? And so he was talking about that for TikTok recently. It's like, it's already too late for some people. They should have been there 6 months ago, right?
Yeah.
You got to be there first, and then you're going to get the attention as a B2B player, somebody who's unexpected.
And I think that's the problem with B2B from my perspective, is that they move too slowly, and they've been able to get away with that because, in the 80s and 90s, especially in America, the economy was good. You can kind of get away with not necessarily having this crazy technical innovation. But I think that every year that moving slow becomes more and more of a disadvantage in terms of adapting to this stuff.
Pace of change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think we covered a lot. We might have to, have another one of these sooner than later. I want to remind guests to come back for episode 8. We're actually talking with Mark from Digital Commerce 360. I think they're formerly internet retailer. They also have a B2B component. He actually leads their B2B component, so that's going to be really exciting. So definitely stay tuned for episode 8. And then, but yeah, thanks so much, Laux. This was awesome. I think we got into some really specific. We went broad and specific, which I like. We did everything.
It's been great talking with Laux. Really a pleasure having you as a guest on our podcast, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks so much.